Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first panel series. Thank you for making the time to join us today. We're so thrilled to be hosting this panel series. I'm Callista from Eden Strategy Institute, and we're working together with the Social Service Institute, part of NCSS, the National Council of Social Service, to bring this wonderful panel series to you today. As you can see, today's panel is Joining Forces, Fostering Strategic Collaboration Between Businesses and Social Service. And so we'll be hearing from a wonderful panel of experienced folks from the social service sector and from the corporate side who have joined forces to create these wonderful collaborations to drive social impact in their respective organizations. I see many of you here. It's wonderful to see so many of you interested in this, and we're hopeful that today's session will be fruitful for you and will spur a lot of new perspectives and thoughts and great examples of these effective collaborations that we've seen. Just to give you a taste of what we'll be going over today, we'll start with some opening words from NCSS, followed by a quick overview of each of our panelists and their backgrounds, and then we'll start with the discussion proper. Following that, we'll have a quick time for Q&A, and we'd love to hear what each of you, all of your burning questions, all of the things that you're interested in from the panelists' discussion. That's a time for you to ask those questions, and then we'll do a quick closing after that. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Mr. Fermin Diaz, who is the Deputy CEO and Group Director of the Sector Capability and Transformation Group at the National Council of Social Service, to just give us a couple of opening words to start the session. Over to you, Fermin.
Thank you, and good evening, Anita, President of NCSS, panel speakers, and all of our guests for today. Thank you for attending this board webinar event brought to you by Gather Here. Just a quick word on what Gather Here is for those of you who are hearing about it for the first time. Gather Here is a trusted knowledge source and online community for anyone interested in Singapore's social service and nonprofit sectors. You can collaborate and network with other like-minded individuals, influencers, nonprofit agencies, social enterprises, and corporations in a fun and exciting way. We welcome you all to join the community to find out more. Since last year, this COVID pandemic has been hitting us extremely hard, both physically and economically. To measure the impact of COVID-19 on Singaporeans and on the social service agencies, NCSS has conducted numerous surveys in 2020. The results have revealed that while the quality of life for the general population seemingly has improved since phase 2 of Singapore's reopening of the economy, the same cannot really be said for specific groups, such as seniors and people with disabilities. The surveys also showed that the agencies faced greatest challenge in the areas of digitalization, fundraising, and a few other areas. Nonetheless, adapting to COVID-19 also brought along positive outcomes, such as digitalization of the sector and flexible work arrangements, something that SSAs will continue benefiting from beyond the pandemic. They also actively partner with Singaporeans and the community to support people in need. As you can see, the social service sector in Singapore has proven its resilience once again through this COVID pandemic. By staying open in adapting to changes and combining our strengths together, we have shown our beneficiaries that tough times don't last, tough people do. While this pandemic does not seem to be going away anytime soon, the way forward in safeguarding our beneficiaries' best interests will have to be the provision of innovative and sustainable solutions for them. To weather any possible crisis that comes our way, we want to partner with organizations that can complement our strengths and to look out for our blind spots as we go beyond our comfort zones and try something new. Particularly, being strategic in our collaboration helps us to look into our strengths, assets, and needs while seeking out partners who can benefit from joining forces and working together with us. To highlight the impact of strategic collaborations, I would like to borrow these words from Mr. Masagos Kifli, Minister for Social and Family Development. And he said, I quote, COVID-19 has underscored the importance of strong partnerships that can enable Singapore to address challenges and emerge stronger together. This is perfectly in sync with the title of today's webinar, Joining Forces, Fostering Strategic Collaboration Between Businesses and the Social Service Sector. It is really my pleasure to bring to you this panel discussion, which aims to explore the opportunities, key success factors, and challenges of strategic collaborations between businesses and the social service sector. Additionally, we will highlight potential collaboration outcomes. These could be an increased scale of reach of impact, new channels and customers, new business models, or new innovations to improve operations and beneficiary impact. This webinar is co-organized with our partner, Eden Strategy Institute, a Singapore-based social innovation firm that works with government agencies, corporations, and NGOs across the globe to design smart, sustainable strategies and business and operating models that have social impact. Eden Strategy Institute has successfully helped local SSAs such as YMCA and United Women Singapore to achieve their strategic goals. We hope that you'll participate actively with us as we explore different models of collaboration to overcome challenges and find solutions together, to create shared success and lasting social impact. We welcome you to ask questions later during the Q&A session immediately after the panel discussion. We also seek your support to participate in the survey afterwards, as your feedback and suggestions will help us to plan ahead for future engagement plans with all of you. Last but not least, if you want to continue the engagement after this exciting event, remember to join Gather Here so that you won't miss out on the latest updates and lineup of activities from us. Thank you again very much for making time today. We wish you an enjoyable session. But before I go, let me introduce you to our moderator for tonight's panel discussion. Our moderator is Mr. Calvin Chu Yiming. He's the managing partner at Eden Strategy Institute. He is responsible for thought leadership, strategy design, client servicing, mission delivery, and practice management. He has served as a judge and mentor at the President's Challenge Social Enterprise Award, the DBS NUS Social Ventures Challenge Asia, Social Innovation Camp Asia, just to name a few. With his wealth of experience in the social innovation arena, we will definitely benefit much from his insights that he is going to share with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Calvin Chu.
Thanks very much, Fermin. You're too kind. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having us here today. And it's really nice to see such a big turnout at the event today. We have over 200 people who are here right now. And earlier I was sharing with the panelists the range of people interested in this include not only many chair people and boards, but also EDs, professionals within the social services sector. We have some some IHLs that are here, some government agencies, and even several corporations that are here. So thank you all for being here. We hope to spend the next hour and a half or so, or hour, on answering as many of the questions that we can that must be on your minds. For me, I see this role as mostly acting as a advocate for you. Whatever questions you may have, I'm just going to try to play the part to voice them out and let our panelists to do most of the heavy lifting. On an administrative note, there is a Q&A function below. I would just encourage all of you to use the function. So later I'll be going through that rather than the chat function. And we'll check off the various answers as we go along. The plan today is to spend most of our time with the panel There are no slides. Actually, I noticed a few questions around slides. So this is just an intimate discussion where we are going to go quite deep into the different aspects of what it takes to pull off successful partnerships and collaborations from the social sector and with outside, for example, with government as well as with the business sector. So we're going to cover what success looks like. We're going to talk about the types of partnership. We'll talk about the roles of the board in forming some of these partnerships, and also how do we get there and what's in it for us. So there's quite a lot to get into. There's a bit of flexibility. I love to be a bit dynamic. If, for example, I notice that there's a lot of Q&A questions, I'm going to cut short a little bit the panel and spend more time on the Q&A so that we take advantage of this platform live, where you can feed your questions to our very esteemed panelists and they can answer your questions as well. So without further ado, let's get into the panel. And I'd like to start off by introducing our panelists. With us is, of course, the president of NCSS, Anita Pham, who is very kindly spending her time with us, even though she's currently on quarantine. She's a former lawyer. She's been volunteering for the last 20 years. She takes on many roles apart from her role with NCSS. She was just sharing with us before this about her role with the Board of Visiting Justices, helping out the inmates, to her role with the CC Hospice, Lien Foundation, SAS Foundation, and SG Cares, many different committees that she's with as well. We also have Claire. Miss Claire Wong is head of DBS Foundation, who we've been very privileged to have known for quite a number of years now. I count her as a good friend. She comes with many years of experience in government, in consulting, in banking, in energy. But mostly we've known her for her very strategic work that she's been doing to push out the support for social enterprises here in Singapore and across the region. So following Claire, we also have Ms. Susie Hermianto, who is Chief Operating Officer of YCAP Foundation. YCAP I've come to know of them as this really amazing organization targeting to impact 5 million vulnerable youths. And what I found to be very interesting is how they've managed to forge partnerships with all the famous brand names that any organization here would be hungry to want to form partnerships with: Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Arena, HSBC, and so on. I'm quite curious how they go about doing that. So later we'll go into that. Susie has spent the last 30 years running corporations and the last 12 years with non-profit organizations. And last but not least, we have the thorn, so to speak, among the roses, Sutat. Mr. Chu Sutat is chairman of Caregivers Alliance Limited, which is, as the name implies, a local non-profit organization, social service organization, helping the caregivers of who are themselves doing a lot of very difficult, challenging work on many different fronts. Caregivers Alliance Limited, or CAL, is the winner of the Charity Governance and Transparency Awards, and I've been quite impressed with how CAL has been able to forge many interesting partnerships with the likes of SAFRA, or creative partnerships to do video collaboration and to do fundraising. And for Sutat, I have a very special relationship with Sutat. In his day job, of course, there are many committees that he's serving on, NCSS committees, and he's also the community chairs vice chairperson. He is the immediate past chair of the Kaki Bukit Citizens Consultative Committee. His day job is head of global sales and origination at SGX, where he is also the chairperson of SGX's Bull Run and their CSR initiatives. Sutat also happens to be my ex-boss about 10 years ago, so I'm very happy that he's still spending time with us today here. Welcome, panelists. If I can invite all of you to switch your cameras on. Very nice to see all of you. So I guess we're talking about strategic collaborations and partnerships today. I guess the first question that must be on everyone's mind is, let's just define what we're talking about. What does success in a partnership actually look like? Could it be, for example, about the longevity of the partnership? Is it about the complementarity of the partnership? Is it about how innovative it is, or the nature of the relationship, or shared learning outcomes? What does success in a collaboration mean for each of you? Let's maybe I would invite the speakers to go in any order, but maybe let's try to call in alphabetical order, perhaps. Anita first, then maybe we can go to Claire and then Susie, and then let's go to Sutat last.
Okay, thanks, Calvin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending the time with us. I hope that it will be a good time of sharing. What does success mean? Honestly, I really feel it depends on the nature of the relationship that is built and the depth of it. So rather than having a one-hit wonder, and it's just like any sort of relationship that you go into, rather than just going on a first date and just calling it off after that, it's really building on that and getting to know each other and getting to trust each other. And when you do trust each other, you're able to actually share a little bit of your vulnerabilities and your challenges. And that's when the power of the partnership comes together. So it's building up trust, building up relationships. And at the end of the day, seeing it more than a short-term thing, it's something that carries you through from the medium to the long term. And that's the shift that we're trying to do. So rather than having very, very short-term funding, it's encouraging everyone to look at longer-term relationships.
Thanks, Anita. Anita, later, I think perhaps what could be on many people's minds is also in the short term, they have their immediate mouths to feed. So, how can we transition from the short-term needs into this long-term strategy? So we'll come to that as well. Maybe let's go to Claire.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Anita said. And first of all, let me apologize for my background. I couldn't, it was laterally inverted on my iPad, so I apologize. Yeah, I mean, I think it is really important to think about the long term, because at the end of the day, you want to have sustainable impact. And I think I think a successful collaboration is one that where both parties win, right? And I think that's what enables it to last longer than the next check that I'm writing. So I think where both parties benefit, and I think it actually takes. I have found that it takes. I would love that things could happen faster, but it does take a while to really, I think, craft a successful collaboration that really creates impact. And I think it's the long-term part and also the impact part. I think it's easy to do something, not so easy to create real sustainable long-term impact, but that's what a successful collaboration should have, right? Yeah.
Thanks, Claire. Susie?
Thanks, Calvin. Yes, so YCAP has, all the big names, as you said, and a lot of people are wondering, but we don't have DBS, so that's something that, yeah. So Claire, when you do your next check, do think about us. But anyway, what does a successful collaboration look like? I guess when our donor is actually not actually a donor anymore, but becomes a part of YCAP Foundation, and they are concerned not about just the project, but the general welfare and sustainability of the foundation itself. And how we actually manage to get to that position, just like Anita says, a relationship. We built that relationship, and it becomes a marriage, and all stakeholders are on the same page. We understand and we appreciate each other's expectations right from the start, so there's no surprises at the end. And at the end of the project, you will find that YCAP will always overachieve from the target. And during sign-off and closing ceremonies, with all our big organizations, they've always come back to us because they know that when we do a project, we do it 110% to ensure that all parties, and we ensure that the impact is there, and we have impact measurements, and we're very professional in everything that we do. And that comes about, I guess, from the top down, from our CEO, Veronica, who's very, very passionate, and she drives all of us, and we're inspired by her energy. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Susie. As you are talking about that, it makes me think, I like the way you've portrayed how by delivering, or even sometimes so-called over-delivering on the project, over the long term, you build that trust that I think Anita also alluded to, and how that trust translates into deep concern for not only the organization, its projects and its deliverables and outcomes, but also the welfare of the organization. So I guess the holy grail, if you will, for fundraising, oftentimes for nonprofits, is also how do you get that unrestricted funding to build capacity within the organization, that you are able to do a lot more than just the immediate beneficiaries you're helping. So I love to maybe later we can go a little bit more into capability development, what it takes to be able to build up that capability in order for people to trust you and be willing to want to see you succeed, and not just what you have to deliver. So thanks for that, Susie. Sutta?
Thanks, Calvin. And I guess I'm the thorn amongst the roses, everything. But, I think I would start perhaps on a slightly different end of things. Success really, as everyone has already said, it has got to be mutually beneficial. It's got to be sustainable. And if I throw another big word out there, it's got to be symbiotic for both the giver as well as the recipient. What do I mean by that? In many instances, there are different definitions of success depending on which side of the fence that you sit on. So, I wear the corporate hat as giver. I sit on some of the ancestors committees. I'm also a recipient of donations for Cal, etc. And it's really what I would term the alignment of interests that has got to be very important. Why do I say that? From a social service agency, which many are represented here today, everyone hopes to have as much money donated as possible with totally unrestricted freedom or flexibility to do what they want with it. So that's the definition of success, maybe coming from one end of this. And on the other end of it, there could be corporates who come in, and their definition of success is to tick the CSR box, tick the ESG box because of corporate sustainability and reporting. Or maybe they sign up to some UN SDG goals. So by ticking the box, it could be successful for them. I wouldn't preclude, and I'm certainly in no position to make a moral judgment on either position. But I think we all can recognize that in some ways, this could be limiting. A charity who just takes the money, who doesn't have the resources to put and invest into a partnership, may limit itself from what potentially could come out of such a partnership. A corporate who's just writing a check and doesn't really care too much about what happens after, besides getting a report so they could publish it, also limits the opportunities to be able to engage their employees, to be able to build that culture within and to create that interaction that can be symbiotic. So, I think symbiosis really is what I would say a definition of success, where it becomes therefore embedded in both organizations, it becomes sustainable, and it can be mutually beneficial. And there are many examples, fortunately for Cal, that we have experienced. And some I see, I've looked at the audience earlier on, some of these individuals who have been the hidden heroes in the respective organizations, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, etc., are also present here today and continue to be helpful to us in different ways.
Thanks for that. So that's a very nice sort of jumping off point into thinking about what is the nature of that alignment between two parties. For it to be sustainable, I suppose there has to be some kind of a value exchange, a give and a get, right? And I love to hear from all of you on, what are some of the key types of exchanges, if you will, that you all have found to be most useful. For example, Susie may have alluded to how impact assessments have been instrumental in helping even, let's say, a corporate supporter be able to justify why they are investing in this or supporting this particular organization. It could be employees that are doing skills-based volunteerism that turn out to feel a great sense of purpose and loyalty to the companies that they're working with, that allow them to express themselves that way. Or it could be brand building or other aspects. So I love to hear from all of you how you think what you're doing, how you have found to be successful in orchestrating some of these gives and gets. From the funder side, maybe for Claire, one thought is also, how do you try to set it up, right? What do you ask for? And how ready are they to deliver on that? We can go in any order.
Actually, Calvin, I'd like to chime in a few things. In as much as we do need funders and supporters for the medium to long term, we do still need funders for the short term as well. So I think it's really the language of the ask that's very, very important. And I found that through the years, for, especially if we are approaching corporate donors, it is to use the business of language. So rather than saying, can you give me a donation of X amount, it's translating that into a coherent business plan, and thereby engaging the potential donor in that journey with yourself. So with that, you actually need a clarity of the plan. You actually need to have a very clear end goal, and you need to actually know the whole scope of what you're doing. It's the language of business. And language of business now goes beyond that. That's what Claire was alluding to. I mean, we're talking now that for a lot of funders, they're looking at a measurement of impact as well. So how do we articulate that? So there are many, many parts to it. We need the short-term funders. We need the small donors. We need the ones who are there for the medium to the longer term. But we also need honesty. And I share that there was a program that many years ago, I got a bank involved in it, and it was a very, very innovative program, and they came in. And they came in many ways. They came in with substantial funding, but also with the entire HR structure. They actually put in mentorships. It was a job preparation program for young people with disabilities. But as we went into it, about maybe 3 years in, and we had created the infrastructure. It was a really beautiful place we had young people who were securing jobs. But one day I sat down and I calculated the cost per head, and I realized it was so expensive. And I thought to myself, I can't justify it. And I actually went back to the funder and I said, it is not sustainable going ahead doing it this way. And I actually returned the funding to them, the balance of it, because it was not right. It was just not the right time. This is 10 years ago. I think it would be a very different situation now, but that's what happened.
And that's a very, really astute point. Not only that you have to, in a way, put in place the proper business controls or the proper business imperative. Why are we doing this and what's the benefit to business? But also in a way comparable or business metrics that the corporations can identify with as well. Productivity, for example, they might have a certain lens, and how we think about how that plays out in a social service setting is also quite interesting. Thanks for that. Any other comments from the other panelists on give and get? So that.
Or maybe Calvin, I could chime in here, perhaps with an example. To elaborate a little bit further on what I mentioned earlier about having a symbiotic relationship, and Anita is absolutely right. You need different donors, different supporters for different purposes. So, the charity or the social service agency first has got to be receptive, willing to have support, and to be very clear about its needs and its willingness to engage the donor. There are folks who not just want to give the dollar, but their definition of success or their interest would be maybe having staff contribution, maybe to be able to do a project, etc. But if you don't have the capacity to do that, these things should be discussed upfront, because otherwise there would be disappointment on either side. So I don't want to start with a negative story per se, but I think it's important to recognize that without having expectations understood upfront, then it limits the potential success, it limits the impact, and it could lead to a mismatch of expectations and unintended consequences. But on the positive side, and I want to use an example with how Cal had actually partnered with Deutsche Bank, right? So there are, for SSAs out here who are looking for who amongst the corporates can actually be a donor, look at the SDG goals the company has signed up for, look at what's their ESG strategy, and you may be surprised, you may find a lot of different corporates who have that interest. So Deutsche Bank, their global CSR interest is actually in the mental health area. And we managed to, in Cal, find a few what I describe as hidden heroes within Deutsche Bank who were very interested in the subject of mental health, internal champions. And because they were internal champions, it was not so much about, okay, can we get on the donor list for Deutsche Bank for any X given year? But it was, how can we work to actually reach out to the employees in Deutsche Bank, also share the caregiver training, and to be able to then reach out to Deutsche Bank, their employees, and offer a benefit, so-called, in that way. Over the course of time, we have managed to conduct 11 C2C caregiver-to-caregiver courses using Deutsche Bank's premises, which is very valuable because premises are always expensive. But we have managed to touch some of the lives of their staff, their family members, and in so doing, they have become a multi-year supporter. These hidden heroes, a couple of whom are also here with us today, have also gone on to volunteer in other mental health organizations, and they've also gone on to champion other related causes. And they become force multipliers across the sector. They become people who can connect us when we are actually looking to do an awareness program like the recently held Walk for Mental Wellness that Cal did. It combined what I call a coalition of the willing, because the deeper relationship embedded so that it becomes part of an institutionalized culture ensures longevity and creates a much wider impact. So that's, I think, a positive example. But it starts again with, okay, let's understand what your interest is and how could an SSA really be able to support and bring something to the organization beyond, you know what, I just want the money. Thank you very much for doing great work. And we might tell you about the impact at some point.
Thanks for that. I really love the story. And by the way, you know, venues like this, when we can share some of the war stories, even the failures, I think people really appreciate that too. Not only the great successes, but in that success story, I really appreciated how not only is it about the strategic alignment that you talk about, but also the ability that Cal has not only to sort of ask for support, but to offer a service, right, to train their staff, not just staff, and also that the nature of the exchange may not only be, say, financial or economic, but also through in-kind, for example, use of premises. So I quite like the resourceful way that all of you are thinking about it. So thanks for that story. Love to hear more war stories and not successful stories. It's also great. Susie?
Okay. We are very, very fortunate in all our collaborations. They've all been absolutely fantastic. And we don't have one night stands, and they're married to us in bed forever, you know. And for example, to the point where they are absolutely concerned about our team, the management. So during COVID, our partnership, for example, with Google, we were actually assigned 2 teams, one from Asia Pacific office and one from Indonesia office, to actually help the team at YCAP through this COVID pandemic, you know, going through the, you know, how we're coping with our HR, how, you know, how they you know, teaching our team, our HR team, you know, what to do, the stress management, and then also teaching us to upskill. You know, there's a lot of things in G Suite, which a lot of people, you know, have heard about, but not know all the little details. So they went through all that training for, you know, every single member of the YCAP team. And, you know, for me, that's, you know, like a successful collaboration. And, you know, whenever we need something or we're stuck with something, we can all actually just reach out to all our collaborating partners. And they, you know, we're not like, oh, here's your donation, I've ticked the boxes, that's it. It's not that. It's actually building a family relationship.
Thank you, Susie. You know, the ability to lean on the multitude of resources and capabilities a corporation has, in addition to its financial resources, HR skills, and so on, I think is immense, and that opens up also the envelope for many of our friends in the social services sector now to think creatively, not only as what Sudha said about what are the strategic themes and the impact themes that the corporations, potential corporate partners might care about, but what is the wide range of resources that corporations can lend to any particular social service partner. As perhaps we move on to Claire, I would love to hear from you, Claire. I think part of it, as DBS, I know you all do a lot of skills-based volunteerism, different kinds of financial products for social enterprises and so on. But you know, as you are perhaps commenting, Claire, I would also love to hear from you if on the other side, have you also received some benefits into your organization as a funder, as a foundation, that can in a way balance off this give and get? You know, what has it been for you that you've enjoyed through some of these relationships?
Yeah, so I think from the perspective, I guess, of a corporate, I think a lot of what you all already said is true. And I think this is the way forward, right? I think for a lot of corporates, I think the giving has to be seen and communicated. I mean, for us, it has to be something that is, I think, integrated to our business as well. I mean, I think in the past, yes, we think of CSR giving as a check the box, a separate thing, and all that. But I think now when we evaluate, okay, because I mean, we do get, all kinds of emails and requests and all that all the time. How do we evaluate, right? So we have to have some evaluation criteria and all of that. And that has to do with alignment with what the bank wants to do, what do we champion, and I guess back to the first point, which is how can we actually have a longer term partnership? Because we can't evaluate everything as one-off. That's not, I mean, I think our view is that doesn't create sustainable impact. So therefore, I think the number of organizations that we work with perhaps is also fewer, but we want to hopefully do that over a longer period of time and do it across multiple different parts of the bank. So say for us, what are some things that we think are important? I mean, I guess we incorporate giving as part of our overall sustainability agenda as well. And so as a bank, as part of our sustainability agenda, things like, financial inclusion, other areas that we can provide financial literacy programs, education, because that's something that we do as a bank. So I think it is very much, we want to think about what are the synergies we can bring as well. I think the other thing that we very, very much want to do when we do give is volunteerism. And that is a challenge actually, because most people just want our money, but they may not have opportunities for employees to be involved. And that is an important part of what we would like to see as well. So we do try to build in opportunities for our employees to be involved. So I think for a lot of our successful collaborations, it is multifaceted. It has, employee involvement. If it's with social enterprises, we procure from them. We put them on our credit card platform. So we try to make it as multifaceted as possible so that I think we really bring whatever we can as a bank to bear, and they benefit from it as well. So I think it is that, I think, from a corporate standpoint, it is thinking about what does the bank want to achieve, not just in a like, I check this SDG goal, this is the impact I'm creating, but also, what are the strengths of us as a bank that we could actually bring to the table when we have this collaboration. So those things are important to us. And I think sometimes when agencies come to us, I also acknowledge that it is hard because everyone sees things only from your own perspective. So there's often this gap, right? And hence I think it is not easy to have successful collaborations because each party just wants their own thing. And if it doesn't bring, if we feel that we're not able to contribute, then we rather not do a one-off, thing, because it's just not, it's not a good use of resources. So I think it's integrating what we see we can bring as a bank, and hopefully that creates impact for the other organization as well.
Calvin, if I could sort of just add on something to this topic. As Anita did mention earlier, the sustainable long-term partnerships are obviously very important to everyone, including ourselves. But we are not averse to one-night stands or once-offs. And why do I say that? Because it's really about alignment of interest, and there are some folks who really just want to commit in that level. And what's critical is the expectations are set up front, especially on the SSA side. Do you have the resources to even do that properly, so that there's a good experience, even it may be a one-off kind of activity? I think that's very critical. So, we are fortunate, in particular, since 2 years back when MCCY did accredit Cal as the most corporate governance and transparency awards for medium-sized charities. They kindly awarded Cal that. We've had people coming to us to volunteer help. But if we don't have the resources beyond the work that we are already supposed to be doing, then how do we engage? That is, I think, something everyone needs to understand. Recently, NCSS actually also very helpful. They channeled a request from Goldman Sachs to come in to say, look, they want to come and help us do an IT project because They're very smart people there, and they've got a lot of talents. They can do programming. They can do a hell of a lot of stuff. And my immediate response was, hang on a minute, that could be way over our heads. What could we do with this gift and make sure that it's going to be productive, rewarding, and sustainable in terms of its outcome for Cal after they do the project and leave. So, I think there are horses for causes. One sort of short-term things may appeal to certain donors. And as I mentioned earlier, I cast no moral judgment on why people do what they do, if the outcomes are better understood, and if both parties make the commitments for whatever they have signed up for, then I think you'll have good experiences. Otherwise, whether it's short or long term, you will lead to unintended consequences.
Great points to that. So very practical, very utilitarian view. I guess from Claire's comments, it's also about having a certain kind of donor centricity and empathy to understand what is it that the donors are really looking for. And all of this, what you all have all mentioned, whether it's about impact assessment or getting yourself ready for, let's say, a large IT project, makes me wonder also about a bit of a chicken and egg thing and capability development, right? So we have spoken about how if you get a big donor coming in, but yet you're not yet so-called ready to deliver, that it could be worse than not even starting the relationship with them. As we are talking about it, about managing expectations, I wonder how you all think about what is a sequence of a core set of capabilities that has to be in place as you are going about forging some of these corporate partnerships. Is it governance? Is it manpower capability? Is it speaking the business of language? Keeping in view that many of our social service organizations are not necessarily all well resourced, how do they then make a decision around what capabilities they have to put in place in order to forge strong strategic collaborations?
I would say one of the most important things to start off with is making sure, no matter whether you're the smallest charity or the largest one, is alignment between your management and your board. Because when you have both in alignment, at least you know that the organization is going to just go in one direction. It's not being pulled in several. And in that way, you can get the board in to also help, especially with smaller organizations. I think depending on the life journey that they're on, I mean, there's some choose to stay small, even though they've been around for a long time. Others are in that growth trajectory. But either way, they really have to be in one concord in knowing what they're and being clear about that, and really having that unity in terms of leadership. And also honesty in realizing whether or not you actually do have the capabilities. You have to have the capabilities in order to drive a good organization. And that is the challenge. Because in the past, especially, a lot of us existed just on program funding, where we were actually getting donations or we were being funded just for one sort of aspect of what we do. But realizing now that more and more what we do is more and more complex, there is actually a recognition that we actually have to be better at what we do. And that gives the donors the confidence that their money is going to be well spent. But the old adage was, and many of us are guilty of that, I used to say, when I donate, I want all my money to go to the beneficiary. But if you think about it, you need an organization to be well run in order for them to really serve their users really well. So you need really well-equipped, capable organizations. And how does that happen? That's the challenge. So it's hard because we have funders who traditionally don't want to fund operating costs. And I saw a question in the chat. That's where we are now. It's trying to change mindset to influence people that we actually have to support operating costs in order for organizations to be run better and more efficient and more doing. And so it's shifting people and donors into that area that they actually have to support costs in order for the organizations to be run better. But how do you translate that into donation language? And that's what I went back to my earliest point that I said was, we have to translate that into business talk, business speak, and measure that and the impact and be able to translate the cost So actually one of the capabilities we need within our own organizations is to be able to price it out. So we know exactly how much each of our services costs and to justify it to our potential donors.
Thanks, Anika. Hearing from someone in your position to say that the sector should seriously think about funding capability, and is probably a very best start that we can have, especially for many of the foundations and funders who are on this call as well. I like the point about pricing it in. Resonates a little bit with what Sudha was saying earlier, offering it as a service as well. I'm wondering if there are any other comments, or even other good practices. Right? For example, I've come across certain kinds of fund structures or grant structures that would always commit a certain grant to, of course, the actual running of the particular program, but also maybe some success-based fees and also some capability development fee costs as well. So that brings about a more holistic, more sustainable, comprehensive kind of support, right? Wondering if any of the other panelists have any thoughts on capabilities or creative funding structures that can support the development of capabilities.
Yeah, so we have a lot of our pro bono consultants, like Boston Consulting Group, Ernst & Young, and Accenture. So they are our pro bono partners who actually come in to help us build capacity, help us with our strategy. But like Anita said, there needs to be a shift in the mindset, because a lot of proposals, a lot of donors don't like to pay for operational costs and things like that. So basically, in all of our proposals, we do build it in, and they don't like to pay for salaries either. We in the nonprofit are supposed to work for free, but obviously that that doesn't happen. So, but we form, they're quite considerate, but they do give a percentage. So no more than, some is 7%, some is, as long as it's below 10%, it's acceptable.
Thanks for that, Susie. That's very helpful. I want to maybe just close off this point on capabilities. Maybe from Claire's side, if you have any thoughts on capability as a funder, as a supporter, grant maker, what are the core capabilities first and foremost that you'll be looking for? And also, if you had any comments, maybe reflecting, I'm just looking at a question that came about from, I think, Anita's comment earlier around some costs and your expectations around cost efficiency, right? How do you try to square coming from a business as well, from one of the best banks in the world, trying to square this kind of business thinking with business metrics, and yet at the same time trying to make sure that they have the capabilities to deliver these things while achieving the outcome. How do you think about this broad balance?
Okay, so I think the first comment I'll make is that I guess maybe from a corporate standpoint, sometimes I think that sometimes we also don't know how to offer capabilities. Like, let me give you an example. For example, one of the things that DBS has been pushing out a lot, both internally, I guess internally actually, is on data analytics, data basically. So we've run a lot of these data programs and all that. And we try, whatever we run internally, we also then try to see if we could extend some of these things externally, right? And the same goes for our tech as well. Our tech teams are very keen to actually support, helping to build tech capabilities in nonprofits as well as charities and so on. But sometimes we do struggle to find the people that we should connect with for different reasons. So I think it's again alignment of interests and things like that. So I think sometimes from a corporate standpoint, I think it's also the right matching of what we can offer and where do we find the people that would need our solutions in a sense. And I think the second thing I would mention from a funding perspective is for me, I mean, our funding, a lot of DBS, most of DBS Foundation's funding obviously goes to funding social enterprises. But I think there are some probably learnings from that might be relevant. And that is, I think, so when we fund, right, we do have milestones. So I am less concerned about whether they spend on manpower, on operations or whatever, but I'm concerned with like, by funding this, these are the milestones that you need to meet, meaning that like, okay, you need to have trained how many people, or you need to have set up a team in India. You need, so I am actually more concerned about whether the outcomes are achieved through the funding that I'm giving to you. So so we, you know, we're not so concerned about what, I mean, of course, like the cost has to be reasonable, and we accept that, yeah, in order for you to be able to provide, say, healthcare access in India, you do need to set up a team to do that. You need to pay the people. So we do set milestones, and the funding is dispersed on milestones. So for our grants, is dispersed over 2 years with, you know, with milestones. And of course, the milestones have flexibility. I mean, if like COVID hits and things are different, obviously they can be changed. But I think we are focused on what we want this funding to achieve, and not so much like necessarily what the money, you know, is what category the money is spent on. So that's how we would view funding. And I think the same, so those are of course longer term relationships. And I mean, in COVID, I mean, there have been shorter term, so-called more immediate term partnerships that we've had as well. And also there, I mean, we also agree on what we want that funding to achieve, right? So we partner with people like the Food Bank or It's Raining Raincoats, you know, to provide meals to vulnerable communities. And those are, I mean, short-term in the sense of there was an immediate need, right? But we also agreed on, yeah, obviously, like what do we want to achieve from that? We wanted how many meals, we wanted which category of people. So agreeing on the outcomes, and then, you know, moving from there. So I think I would focus on what is the money supposed to be used for, and is it achieving that or not? Yeah.
Thanks, Claire. So I mean, not to harp on this point, but I really appreciate how you are thinking of it from an outcomes funding perspective and the means to arrive there. And I can imagine that some nonprofits might be thinking about how there are oftentimes certain things that are being done. For example, let's say using your data example, in order for them ultimately to be able to run a program well, they might have to digitalize their resource. They might have to get some people in to, you know, do some basically administration capabilities for the organization. And it's a bit harder to tie that all the way to the funding. So I suppose that's a bit of that context that people might be wondering about, which comes in the form of admin or headcount, basic HQ headcount kind of thing, right? If there are no additional comments around,
Calvin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so I thought I would give a perspective from the SSA point of view. CAL is a relatively young organization. It's about 8 years old. When I got involved in CAL, we were operating at a budget of about just under $1 million a year. Impact was limited, albeit the programs and the results were very positive for those who participated in it. And traditionally, what happens would be you try to find new money before you embark on new things. So we took on a much more challenging task. We took a slightly different view and we said, look, if we think we can execute and what is right, then we will find the money. So we went on this multi-year cycle, and then being typically Singaporean, we were quite kiasu about it. We said the board's aim is to build 2 years reserves. So that meant $2 million at that time in 2016. And why do we want 2 years reserves? So whatever we commit to, we know we can actually continue for a period of time. But let's face it, if you can't change donors' views about not funding operating expenses, and you can't change a lot of the existing precedents, whether it's through grants, etc., then I think each SSA has to try to build its own capability. So as we embarked on this, we now have an operating budget of about $2.5 million a year, but the incremental impact has gone up exponentially. So I think we're quite happy with that. But I'm pleased to say that to some extent, we've achieved the goal of being able to get 2 years funding in terms of reserves, so that we can continue this fixing the engine as we fly the plane process, and not moan about, well, I got headcount, I got overheads. Well, if I hire someone to focus on fundraising and publicity and branding, it helps, and that pays for itself. If I have volunteers who can help that, it's even better, it's free. And there are all these capability building grants that are available from the various agencies, SCSS, etc. I'm not quite sure how much have they been tapped, and whether or not the people who don't tap on it is because they don't have the focus, the resource, and the attention. So it's a chicken and egg problem. So what we're trying to say now is like, look, we think $500,000 of OPEX is never going to go away if I want a professional organization with good governance that can really exhibit the opportunity to scale and do better. In that case, instead of going donor by donor and say, would you fund OPEX versus this program, which is very hard, then we have to find the resources. Either we fund at $500,000 every year ourselves, which we do, or over time, we are hoping to build a war chest so that we have sufficient reserves that can actually, from just the annuity or the return on it, actually cover this OPEX. So I'm not saying that it's easy to get there, but I think if we set the aspiration right, then we would be able to get these things in the right order rather than just slowly, let's just wait for writing to a lot of people, waiting for the funding to come before we ever embark on things.
I agree with Sutat. One of the hats that I wear is I chair Assisi Hospice, which is in the end of life palliative care arena, which is not until recently well funded. We really were very, very much reliant on fundraising. So about 3 or 4 years ago, we put together a resource strategy task force to really look at that, because we had to find the unfunded portion for us every year was $17 million a year, which is not a small amount. And how can we do that every year? So we sat down and I pulled in people from outside the organization to brainstorm with us, to work out a strategy, a multi-pronged strategy to deal with this. One part was, of course, to approach the ministry funders, because it's a health program, and we articulated with full cost accounting, so we could tell them exactly how much it costs per patient per bed. So from a system standpoint, they could see that it was a financially more economical alternative to someone who was actually in a restructured, in a bed, a C-class ward bed. So that's one part. And then we looked at insurance coverage for this, both private and public. And the other thing that we looked at, and is what Sutat talked about, and is an endowment, is actually building up a war chest so we could have an annuity that could replace some of the funding. So it takes the relief off. So basically, you put in a lot of effort to fundraise. Our target there is 100 to 150 million, because if you think about it, with that, an annual yield would actually be quite decent. So the pain and effort that we're putting in isn't short-term pain and effort, which one normally does for fundraising, because you're putting in that same amount of effort, but poof, the money goes in 1 year. But this, having said that, only certain organizations will be able to do this if they have the scale of services and the will to be able to articulate and pull this through, because you have to build up $100 million in order for it to create that annuity. And some will be able to do it, some can't, depending on the nature of the area in. But my point is, we have to look at many, many different strategies in order to engage donors out there and different approaches.
Thanks, Anita. I love to bring this back to, in a way, the role of the board. It was the foresight of the boards, the two boards, Anita and Sutat, that the both of you mentioned, that had this ambition and this scale to say, okay, let's build out a war chest, for example. It is also, in a way, the role of the board to perhaps orchestrate some of these relationships to set the tone, to set the expectations, many of the things that we have spoken about earlier today. I'd like to expand on that a little bit, and also maybe last two questions, right? I think there's one question on how do people actually build relationships with you. So we'll come to that after this. And I think the question before that is also what should be the role of the board that you found to be most successful in forging some of these collaborations?
I think you need to find the right people for your board. So it's not bringing in your good friends. It's actually looking very honestly at what your organization needs. And when you think about it, if you bring those people in who are good, you get the pro bono support and input from them. So it's bringing in people who are invested in your mission, who can help you. Because we know what we know, we don't know what we don't know. So it's always important to look around for people who know more than you do and bring them in. So having people who are prepared to work and give input and who really believe in your mission and cause is very, very important.
In our pre-call, we also spoke a little bit about having very serious names to lend credibility and networks, and that one very, very strategic phone call, as it is to have a bunch of people who are willing to roll up their sleeves in the board composition as well. I wonder if Susie, Sudat, Claire, if the rest of you have any thoughts on what the role of the board should be.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead, Susie. Yes.
Okay, so I've worked in several nonprofits, and I have to say, and I've said it very often, that at YCAP, it is just totally different from all other boards that, organizations I've worked at. And the reason being, I think the board at YCAP is handpicked. They are passionate. They are very, very in very high positions. They are well networked, and our CEO Veronica manages all of them as one big family. And so they come on board, and they advise us. They advise the partnership team on the language and what kind of things does corporates expect. They give us training and build the capacity of the team. So for me, the CEO and the board is really, really important in an organization. But not just that, is also the team that we have. We have 100 people on our team, and every single one of them is committed to the foundation's mission and vision, and that's that is key.
Yeah, I would agree with Ibu Susi. It's really about the team, not just the board. And one thing that I think really have to emphasize, it's about getting the right culture and mindset, whether it's around the board and the team. If the culture is one of collaboration, if the culture is one of mutual accountability, then I think you'll find that a lot of things proceed more smoothly. There are challenges that will always be, whether it's funding, operations, etc. But having that culture established up front could make an organization, both board and management, more open to partnerships and collaboration. On the board, of course, it's great to have some of the luminaries on the board to help with fundraising potentially, or to make those calls. But actually you need both because especially for small and mid-sized charities, you don't have the resources to hire a lot of skilled talent in different areas. So amongst the board members, there will be those who will be able to contribute through their expertise, through their advice, and sometimes really heavy lifting doing the work, as members of my board do. And there'll be others who will be there to support fundraising. As long as everyone knows their place and knows what's expected with a transparent conversation where we do board evaluation, self-assessments as well, then I think that works okay. I mean, I have to say that when I took on the Cal chair role, one of the board members left very quickly after, called Anita. So we were handicapped. And to this day, I am actually, and this is a shout out, I'm looking for additional board member that is preferably a lady, so I could have more diversity than our 30% currently. Also someone who could help with fundraising. My friend's kneecaps are broken already. And preferably, of course, if we could actually find someone who is ethnic minority and also with IT experience. So this is a shout out. Cal is looking for a lady minority, non-Chinese that is, with IT experience and could be a fundraiser.
Don't know if they are. This is like a ninja, right? Can I maybe pass the time to Claire? You have any thoughts about what you think of, what you might look to the board to give us a sense of assurance when you are looking to partner with any organization? And also, Claire, just this broad question about how in your view, is the best way for social service organizations to just meet you and network with you and build relationships that we've been talking about this evening?
Okay, I don't have too much to add because I think yeah, I guess because for me at DBS Foundation, it is obviously very different. I mean, so I don't have experience from the perspective of a social service organization at all. So, but I guess what I would say is that I think for me, our board actually represents different parts of the bank that we actually want support from. Because I mean, DBS is a large bank, right? I mean, the foundation is a tiny part of the bank, but we need, so I guess it's internal networking, if you put it that way. Yeah, so that's kind of how we view, I mean, maybe it's not so different, right? Because we want support from many different parts of the bank, and that's kind of how we view our board as well, and it's being able to provide us that kind of support. Both, I mean, that's internal, and we also have a number of external board members as well. From the perspective of sorry, your second question was
networking, right? And
yes,
relationships.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, admittedly, it is terribly challenging. I mean, yeah, as in COVID times, it is extremely challenging. But I think I guess in these times, I mean, I actually feel that like it or not, your communication skills on email is pretty important, because we all get lots of email requests for a meeting, a discussion, and all that. But and that seems to be the main means of connecting right now, you know. And but I find that okay, maybe this is again from a corporate perspective. So yes, so I guess when people write in to request for funding and so on, I guess most of the time you don't consider maybe what the corporate is looking for. And so you can give me a very long email, but it doesn't resonate with what I'm looking for. And amongst the many emails that anyone would read, it doesn't get to the top of the pile, right? So I think just here, you don't have the benefit of a room where you can chat, you can have the time to actually unpack everything that you're thinking about and doing and so on. So I feel like in COVID times, actually being able to write that email, communicate it clearly in the first few, you know, I do think that makes a very big difference. That sounds a bit stupid, but because I can't think of many other ways that we actually meet people in these times, and emails are a big part right now, you know. So so that's I guess that would be the first thing. But I will also say that, I mean, like I've mentioned to Calvin also, like for me, because we are very focused on supporting social enterprises, and because we do, and so we do look out for certain things as well when we support them. So I think that comes down to what we want, what we choose to focus on, right? So we believe, I mean, that, you know, that is a great way, because for us to be able to provide them with support, they're able to then really find a way to be sustainable in their business. So that's kind of our focus area, and yeah, and so a lot of times what we're looking out for maybe doesn't apply to the broader, you know, social service sector as much, because we are looking for innovative solutions that we can fund, right? And even currently, we have a grant call that's open. So, you know, if you are a social enterprise out there, there is a grant call that's open right now. Each year, this year we're giving about $3 million. But we see it as a way to kind of get these ideas going that could be sustainable. So we do look for sustainable business models and impact. So those are things that we do look out for, you know, in terms of our focus. So I also want to be upfront. We talk about being upfront. So that is, you know, really our focus area or my focus area. And that is what we would, you know, look out for. So yeah.
Thanks, Claire. I mean, I think some of the business skills you're talking about, like just clear, precise comms, probably doing your homework to figure out, you know, what is it that the organization is really looking to do. And by the way, I just also wanted to just acknowledge that DBS bumping up its annual grant this year in times of real need. And I think that's really much appreciated by the whole sector. I guess in the interest of time, I'm gonna cut short my section of the wrap up, but you know, there's a whole bunch of questions that here and there that we have not really covered. I'm gonna try to look into the very first, the one that's most highly voted, which is really about organizations, social service organizations that may be less glamorous. And I've seen this in many fronts where funding animals and children and all this is very commonplace. But if it's for example, in this case, ostomy, right, colorectal cancer and things like that, maybe it's not so sexy in a way. Just wondering whether you have any advice for how these organizations championing such causes. I think there was a question later on at the bottom also about maybe like LGBT type issues. What advice do you have for these guys of how they can receive assistance, whether from the government, not only necessarily SSI or NCSS? There's a second question that talks about other kinds of, say, stat boards, other kinds of systemic support, all from foundations, right? Do you all have any broad advice if the cost is not so attractive?
Yeah, Calvin, if I could give this a go first. Mental health wasn't very attractive until more recently when it's become a bit of a woke thing. And it was still in many areas filled with a lot of stigma. So fortunately, it's got a lot more national interest and attention. But I would say the advice, whether it's a very popular area or it's a very unpopular area, I would suggest really is as following. What I've seen across many social service agencies over the years is very passionate people who are full believers in the cause that they do. And because they start from that perspective, very often the mindset is, I'm doing such important things. It's the most important cause ever. I cannot see any reason why, a corporate donor or someone else will not want to fund us. And that mindset is a challenge because we know the heart is in there. But starting with that perspective already sets you back. Why do I say that? Because it's like selling and marketing. You have to do your research and you have to identify. There are organizations whose SDG goals support LGBTQ, whose ESG and CSR activities do support some of these causes. And in fact, the tougher your cause is, the more obscure it is. You can actually make the argument of, because it's so obscure, no one is funding this, therefore I need, right? So I'm not saying you will necessarily get it, but you need to start by doing the research on what would be the prospective areas of interest that people will be more likely to align and support your cause. Then you need to do the homework and present it in the language that they will understand it. And you would also then hopefully be able to think through what are the symbiotic things that could be created out of such partnership beyond just give me the money and don't ask me any questions and I'm doing great work.
Yeah, I agree with Sutat. A lot of homework has to go into it. So I remember years ago, doing research on all the foundations that there were in Singapore. And with that, different foundations have different causes. So it's really being very, very methodical in doing your own research and going through that so that you actually get a better chance at the right fit. But it's beyond that. You need to be really good at articulating what you do and that you're doing it effectively and that you give them the confidence that if they do donate, that they will know that the money is being well spent. So it has to be beyond the obvious, the sob story. You actually have to translate that into clear numbers, clear goals, so that they will know that you, first of all, are serious about what you're doing and that you're delivering it efficiently and that you actually have a vision as to how you're going to do it. So it goes back to the language of business, really being able to translate that into language and numbers that others can understand and have confidence in.
Yeah, and after having done a lot of that, you might still get a lot of no's. So a bit of thick skin helps.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm looking at the time, we've covered so much ground and we can keep going on. And I think just judging from all the questions that are coming through, it's been a really rich and beneficial discussion. Thank you for that. I'm going to make an attempt to sum up the wide-ranging discussion, but maybe just one last word from all of you before we go into that. Do any of you, would you all like to share any other final comments or advice that you might have outside of all these things that we've discussed that we have not perhaps touched on yet for especially social service organizations, especially board members in trying to forge good collaborations? Do you have any last sort of parting thoughts and advice?
Calvin, so coming back to that point about a cause that is not sexy, not, it's all to do with the marketing, how you package it. What is your case for support? For example, the hospice is very difficult to find funding for because people don't want to be associated with death. And for example, in New Zealand, we have an organization called Predator Free 2050. And so all the marketing was about how that they want to get rid of every single predator, every single rat, every single stoat, every single possum. Of course, then you have controversials. How are you killing these animals? How are you doing this? And animal rights people were all coming in. So how you package it is actually not in the getting rid of predators, but actually in the saving of the endangered species. So it's very important how you package it to get your funding.
Thank you, Ibu Suzy. Any other final comments? Okay, if not, once again, I would perhaps not be doing justice to this wide-ranging conversation with any kind of summary, but if there are, at least for me, 3 key points that I would take away out of this, I think the first very resonant point is for all of us here is to me, do your homework, right? Making sure that it's very clear, not only your internal board, the composition of your board, your homework that you do on your customers, the way that you're reaching out to them, the capabilities that you have on your board, how do you articulate your goals, how do you deliver effectively and professionalize your organization, form that kind of mutual benefit, give and get. I think the whole point of it is really getting our house in order, do our homework well. I would say that probably the second point is that having done the work well, the outreach to potential partners, especially in the corporate sector, is to be able to well articulate that alignment, the alignment of your vision, the alignment of the themes that they happen to be in, the alignment of your work that you do, of your culture as well, speaking the right language of business, demonstrating even the alignment of your board with members with what that organization is doing. And aligning all the services and the professionalism and the exchange. I think that's also as that way of thinking about it, doing things resourcefully. I think that's probably the second point. And I would say that the third thing that resonates with me that most of you have spoken about is really around this long-term relationship, right? Forging not these one-night stands, but these multi-year, recurrent, mutually beneficial relationships, which, as Ibu Suzy talked about, would evolve over time to having people be so concerned about your organization that they want to see you succeed, that they want to care about the welfare of the organization, even sometimes beyond just the program outcomes. So 3 things: doing your homework, alignment, and relationships. I hope that's been fun for all of you. It's been a real pleasure just listening and learning alongside with each of you. I suppose it's very challenging this short hour to be able to cover all of the questions, but I all of us are using this platform to also see that other people are having the same questions in mind. I appreciate Sutat. I know you've been busy on the Q&A answering many of the questions as well, so thank you for that. Once again, thank you to all the panelists. Can I invite everyone not to drop off yet? We have a couple of things that we want to share with you. But again, thank you, Anita, Ibu Suzy, Claire, and Sutat for your time today. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing all of you in our future sessions. For Gather Here for board members, as you see on the screen, we have many themes that are coming in each month that will follow. What we need to hear from all of you who are here today is to give us guidance on other themes that you are looking to hear from. Maybe this is based on some of our research and conversations, some topics that people seem to be concerned about, especially when it comes to the board. This is our whole focus. Board and ED dynamics, board responsibilities, organizational resilience, sustainable transformation, digitalization, and governance for data. But in addition to these, or perhaps in lieu of these, I would encourage all of you to check out the survey after this, to let us know what you are looking to hear, what you're looking to learn. It's just 10 short questions. We really want Gather Here to be a virtual community where people can learn from each other. Nowadays, we're talking about networking. Not always do we have the opportunity to go out there and meet people and have a beer. So sometimes, doing things online at your own time it's also a very nice solution that we can jump on board. I think this recording is also going to be made available on Gather Here. So I encourage all of you who are not yet already on Gather Here, please go on to that platform and participate actively. Right, we need your participation to make the whole thing a success. Lastly, can I invite all of you to help us out with these 10 short questions on your feedback for today? We want to know how we can do better. And also, please give us your thoughts and ideas about the theme. This is just about 10 questions. It will just take you a few minutes. Please scan the QR code and give your feedback. Thank you once again, everyone. It's been a real pleasure, a real honor. Look forward to seeing you at the next round and have a lovely evening ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.